Today on Garage Noise, we're finishing up this repair series by painting this fender and bumper cover. I'll walk you through all the steps for a base coat, clear coat finish. I'll talk about some basic things you need to think about if you're painting out of your garage or at home so you can get a beautiful looking finish on your repair. I'll pack as much information as I can in this video, but as always, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. So let's dig in and get started. Howdy, Chris here. Today we're painting this Nissan Rogue. We're going to paint the fender and the bumper cover. We're going to do it with the low volume, low pressure paint gun of the Eastwood LT100. And then for clear coat, we're going to use the YT160. This is a tri-stage pearl finish, so we'll put the white base coat on first, then we'll put the mid coat pearl, and then apply the clear coat. Darius is getting this Nissan all masked off. Let's get our first coat of base on this while Darius is taping off that fender. Okay, so as you can see, we're painting in an open garage, no paint booth. So if you guys are doing something like this at home, what we like to do is we wet down the floor really well before we started masking and taping. We blow off the vehicle really well to remove any dust in these inside the fender. We blow it all off, make sure any loose dust has been blown off and removed, and then we wipe it down with some wax and grease remover or some isopropyl alcohol, and then we start the masking process. It's hot today. We're going to see what the temperature of this bumper is. 96 degrees. That's not too bad. And if you're working in hot temperatures like this, there's a couple things you can do to still get a good paint job. And we'll go over some of those things, but the main thing, if you're spraying in hot temperatures, so you don't have a bunch of dry spray, a bunch of sand piling. Somebody was asking in the comments about sand piling. Make sure you're using the proper reducer for the paint and for the temperature you're spraying in. When it's hot, you want to use a slow or extra slow reducer. This will help eliminate that sand piling. You also want to make sure you put it on wet enough. Medium to wet coat is going to really help you with any modeling and eliminate sand piling and just help you when you're laying down your base. As far as clear coat goes, you want to use the right activator for the temperature you're spraying in. Again, a slow activator. This will help that clear coat. It'll slow down the process of that clear coat drying, and that'll help that clear coat to flow out and flatten out before it starts kicking and drying. Because if it kicks too quickly, that's going to lead to orange peel or dry spray, depending on how you're spraying it. So let's get right into it. I'll go over a bunch of tips and tricks on applying clear coat, along with talking about these low volume, low pressure paint guns and how they can help you when you're painting at home or in your garage. As far as the fluid volume, we're going to turn this to 3 turns out. Normally I'm about 2.5 turns, but in these hotter temperatures, I want a little bit more material getting on that panel. So 3 turns out from closed on the fluid volume. Fan pattern is wide open, and then our air pressure, we're going to set it between 12 and 15 psi. Another thing that can help you in these hot temperatures is to reduce your air pressure a little bit. This is going to put more material on that panel wetter, and it's going to help keep it from drying so quickly after you're spraying. Let's go over some basics when you're spraying in an open garage. And the first thing is you want to make sure that vehicle is as clean as possible. Like I said, blow out all the dust, the loose dust, clean it real well, and take some extra time in doing that. You also want clean, dry air before you start spraying. So whatever you have to do to accomplish that, I use just an oil and water separator, an inexpensive one in my airline. And then I also use a water trap on the end of my gun. You also want to make sure you have an adequate amount of air for what you're spraying. Now we're using a low volume, low pressure paint gun, which requires less air to operate efficiently. So you can use a little bit of a smaller compressor, but if you're painting an entire vehicle, you want as much CFMs out of your air compressor as possible. This gun that we're using today can operate with a 20-gallon compressor at about 6 CFMs. If you're spraying an overall paint job, you may have some fluctuation in your air pressure, but for smaller jobs, if you're doing a couple panels, you can get by with that compressor. Before you start pulling that trigger and doing any kind of painting, you want to make sure your panels are prepared properly. If you have questions about how to prepare your panels for paint and clear coat,
check out my YouTube channel. There's multiple videos in there that are going to help you with preparation. This video is about painting.
That's coat number 1. We'll let this flash off for 15 minutes, and then we'll inspect it and put on coat number 2.
When inspecting our base coat, we want to look for any particles of dust that are trapped in that base coat. If there are, you can easily sand those out with some light sandpaper like 1000 grit or 800 grit sandpaper. Smooth those out a little bit and apply another coat of base. Here I'm using a tack cloth to wipe down the bumper, removing any loose dust before we apply our second coat of base. When applying your base coat, and if you're new to applying base coat, it's easy to get some transparent areas, some areas that didn't get enough coverage. So a good rule of thumb is to go over your edges first, get one good coat of base on those first, and then go over your main parts of your bumper. Let's go over some important techniques when you're applying your base coat. The most important thing is you never want to start spraying or stop spraying on the panel itself. You want a nice fluid motion when you're applying your base coat. Okay, you want to have a consistent distance from the panel. So typically you could spray anywhere from 4 to 8 inches, some say 10 inches. I like to spray about 4 to 6 inches away depending on the temperature, and we'll get into that later, but you can make some adjustments on your distance to change how that material is landing on the panel. So mostly in clear coat you can make those adjustments with your distance to affect how that clear is flowing out. But you want to have a consistent distance from the panel at all times when you're going around corners, and you want to be a consistent speed as well. Another thing you want to keep in mind is you want to have a consistent overlap. You want to overlap your previous pass about 70 to 80%. So when I make a pass, it's a little bit hard on a bumper cover because there's so many contours. But if you're on a door and you just made one pass, you want to overlap that previous pass 70 to 80%. This is very important when you're spraying metallic finishes in order to get a consistent uniform appearance in your metallic. If you want more information on how to spray metallic finishes, I have multiple videos that are going to help you with that process.
Okay, we'll give it about 10 minutes. That's the final coat on this bumper. And then we'll be able to put the mid coat on this. Check this with a light, make sure it's not transparent. Everything looks pretty good. I'm just gonna put one final coat on, and then we'll hit it with the mid coats.
So this color is a pearl white, which is a tri-stage finish. So it has 3 steps to this process, which is applying the white base coat. You have a mid coat pearl, which is a translucent pearl that gives it that pearl effect. And then you put a top coat of clear over top of it. Depending on the temperature, you want to allow your base coat 10 to 15 minutes to flash off or dry in between coats of base. Now we're ready to add our mid coat pearl, and I didn't talk about how to mix up your base coat, but this particular base coat I'm using is a Nason base coat. It's a 2-to-1 mixing ratio, so you add 2 parts paint and then 1 part of urethane reducer. When applying the mid coat pearl, I want to put 1 coat on, and then I'll go right into applying my second coat. I don't really let it flash off for very long, maybe a couple minutes. So by the time I spray this bumper, I'll be ready to put my second coat on that fender. Now, as far as the blend on the fender, I want to make sure I add my pearl past the area where I blended the white base. I got to make sure that's covered, and I've got to make sure it's blended a little bit farther past that. So probably about 3 inches past the end of my blend on my white base coat. Here I'm applying what's called a drop coat, where I increase the distance from the panel and then I apply a medium wet coat over that blend area. This helps with the transition of the blend.
All right, now we're gonna do the clear coat. We're using the U-Pole clear coat, 4:1 clear, UP 2892. Oh. We're gonna spray with 30 PSI, fan pattern wide open. 2.5 turns out from closed on the fluid volume. A little dry, not perfect. Looks pretty good, but the second coat will slick it out.
All the same things are important when you're applying your clear coat: your speed, your distance from the panel, your fluid movement. So you want to have a nice fluid movement as you spray. You want to make sure you're overlapping your passes 70 to 80%, because that's going to get a uniform finish in that clear coat. So if you're looking for that glass-like finish, you want to make sure you're letting it flow out. And by overlapping, you're getting enough material on there where you're not going to have any dry spray. You're going to allow it to flow out and get that nice flat finish. If you're not getting the finish that you're looking for when you're applying your clear coat, there are some adjustments you can make just by changing your speed and your distance. So if you're getting some dry spray, that means you're not getting enough material on that panel. You can change that and get more material on the panel by just decreasing your distance to the panel a little bit. Now you got to be careful, because if you decrease it too much, you could get too much material on the panel and get a run. If you notice when you're spraying that you're getting some texture in your clear coat, there's a good chance that you are putting too much material on the panel, and that could cause a run or some orange peel. So you could just increase your distance from the panel a little bit so that clear coat is atomizing a little bit better, and that's going to help flatten out that finish. Let your first coat of clear flash off or dry for 10 to 15 minutes, depending on the temperature, and then apply a second coat of clear. I am moving a little bit closer to the panel and slowing down just a little bit and allowing that clear coat to flow out on my second coat so I get that nice flat finish.
So look at, we still have clear left over. So that's about, we did a bumper cover, 2 coats of clear on a bumper cover and a fender with about 6 ounces of clear.
That's what's great about this YT160, the low volume, low pressure paint gun, and the Eastwood LT100. You use less materials when you're spraying, so less clear coat, less paint. It's going to save you money. It's going to produce less overspray. If you're a DIYer, this gun is the ultimate DIY gun, in my opinion. I use it all the time, and it works perfectly. I mean, look at the finish it produced on this fender. Nice, beautiful looking flat finish. There's a few little particles of dust. We'll cut and buff those out, and then this car will be ready to deliver. And the repair looks great as well. The bodywork turned out perfectly. Really happy with this repair. Let's put this vehicle together and take a look at the finished product. Listen, if you have any questions about the information that was shared here today, leave them in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer anything I can. If you want to learn more about paint and body repair, subscribe to the channel and check out how we repair this fender in these videos. Listen, I appreciate each and every one of you watching. We'll see you next time on Garage Noise.